Welcome, everyone. I'm Blair. I'm standing in for Dr. Dave today, who unfortunately isn't feeling well, so he couldn't be with us. But we still have this time carved out, so we were really excited about this conversation and still want to take this time to connect with Dr. Raghu and share him and his work with all of you. So I think we definitely want to reschedule another conversation when it can be Dave and Dr. Raghu. But yeah, we're so excited to have you. As we get started, I'm just going to share some housekeeping with us all. Our Apollo team is here to answer your questions. Just make sure to use the Q&A box to ask your questions, not the chat function. So they'll be answering the questions there. If you do have any questions about your Apollo wearable, the email for our customer support is in the chat. So that's best to ask them, off of webinar time. During this hour, we're really going to focus on all the amazing mental health questions that you all have. And we will not be able to address any specific medical questions. So if there's something specific that you want to ask, it's best to always ask your doctor. But yeah, let's dive in. Welcome, Dr. Raghu. I will read some of your amazing accolades. You have so many. But Dr. Raghu is an integrative psychiatrist, a neuroscientist, and a social entrepreneur who is focused on bridging the gap between Western and Eastern practices to create a wholesome society by taking a proactive approach to health. Currently, he's an addiction psychiatry fellow at University of California, San Francisco, and is additionally investigating the benefits of psilocybin for a range of mental health conditions. His current interests lie at the intersection of psychodynamic psychotherapy, integrative nutritional psychiatry, mental health literacy, advocacy, wellness, entrepreneurship, and psychedelics. And his alter ego's life goal is to become a chef, integrating farm to table experiences in stunning landscapes around the world. So, Raghu, I would love for you to introduce yourself. And additionally, what are you most excited about right now? It could be professional or personal.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Blair, and the Apollo team. We'll definitely get another conversation with Dr. Dave going soon, but it's nice to see you. And, we met previously to your time at Apollo as well. So awesome to reconnect. And speaking of sunny landscapes, it is finally sunny here in San Francisco. That is something I've been super excited about this week. Focusing a lot, when it comes to mental health and mental hygiene, about the simple things that have such strong impacts on our mental and conscious state, but also on our physical state that determines all of that, right? And in essence, our being. And so just even the simple joys of feeling the sun on your face for a few seconds can mean so much. So super excited about that. And I think one thing that I've been just really pumped about in general is just people starting to understand and advocate more for the role of food systems and food, and how important that is for overall health and mental health. And just the conversation that's been increasing on that in the mainstream audience over the past couple of years, and more recently, just the past few years, especially with the pandemic and so forth. And so I think I'm really excited to see that conversation growing, more of the research that's already been shown and done to be uncovered and become more mainstream. And hopefully that actually leveraging and changing the larger institutional academic healthcare centers, and not just, the functional or the integrative docs and practitioners doing the work in smaller settings, but actually influencing larger scale change to happen. So I'm really excited about that. And, that ties in as well with our environment, with climate change, with food accessibility, community development. So it's sort of this root cause issue of so much of how humans live together in community and sustain each other. It comes back to this alter ego I have of like actually using food to bring people together to help their health and their mental health. So there's a reason that it all ties in together.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
It all overlaps. Yeah, I mean, jumping back to something you even mentioned at the beginning, mental hygiene. If someone isn't familiar with what you mean by that term, I think we're all familiar with mental health and maybe some of the, anxiety, depression, those kind of words that are thrown around. But mental hygiene, what do you use that term to describe?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. We think about physical hygiene, which is something that we're all hopefully grown up with, which is that we take care of the physical presence of our body and keeping it adequate, right? So we ensure that we, don't go around smelling really bad so that people will interact with us. We make sure that we brush our teeth so we don't get cavities. But what is it that we really do for our overall mental health? And that's where the concept of mental hygiene comes in, which is what is the routine that you have or the ritual that you have to sustain a baseline positive mental health? For me, and I'm sure we'll get more into this, it's just things like nutrition and community and connection, as well as moments of solitude and exercise. And there's a whole web that you can design around it, but it really comes down to even just getting a core routine of one thing, maybe two or three things that you do on a regular basis, like a meditation for 5 or 10 minutes. What is it that you can do every single day to kind of adhere and create a positive well-being and just overall mental hygiene and mental health for yourself? So instead of thinking about it in a reactive way of, oh my gosh, something went wrong, like I'm feeling super anxious now, I need to like start to kick in my whole coping strategy. This is more taking a proactive and preventative approach to your mental health.
Yeah, I love that because, yeah, that's the thing. We're all, reacting once we finally are completely dysregulated. But how can we prevent that and, regulate more on a day-to-day basis so that we don't get to that breaking point?
Yeah. And, the word dysregulated is also interesting because I think there's an argument to be made that we're actually all regulated. Even if you appear dysregulated by someone else, you're regulated in the state that your body has learned to be regulated, right? Based on prior experiences and prior traumas, broadly defined, your body is regulating according to that. Now, the work comes in understanding how your body regulates and then starting to gain empowerment over that again, and then reframing and restructuring it. So, for example, like if there are certain situations that you tend to become more anxious that maybe other people don't recognize as being anxiety provoking, you're actually regulating in an appropriate way based on the memories of what your body has held and has experienced previously. Now, if you want to change that, it's about starting to dive into the psychotherapy or the work, and diving deeper into your somatic experience and into your patterns and understanding them consciously. And then you can start to empower yourself to maybe react differently and regulate yourself differently. So I've actually kind of like gone away from using the term dysregulated in some ways more recently.
Yeah, that's really interesting. These terms hold so much meaning behind them. And I'm so glad that there is more of this conversation with mental health. But I think sometimes, yeah, these terms get thrown around like on social media or something, and we don't even really know the reason behind them. Yeah, so working with your patients, you talked about these mental hygiene strategies, tools that you can use daily. I'm sure a lot of us on this call are familiar with a lot of the big ones that maybe, require a lot of time or effort. But what are some of the strategies that you've used with your patients that are maybe free of cost? Like you said, for example, just feeling the sun on your skin. What are a few of those that the audience could take away and just start implementing today?
Yeah, this is something that I have to remind myself about as well. And my own therapist is always reminding me about it when we're doing somatic work, which is she'll just whisper like, did you remember to breathe?
Mm-hmm.
And breathing is so intuitive to our body and to our being. It's also free. Like, we all have the ability to do it. You don't have to pay $30 or $40 to always go to a breathwork class or something like that, right? Like, you can learn a lot of breathing exercises on your own to regulate your nervous system and your body and how you're feeling. So I think oftentimes in this day and age, we forget to breathe. Like, we forget to breathe properly and appropriately. And there's a great book called Breath by James Nestor that I'm sure a bunch of
So
people
good.
have already read. But he did, I mean, all the stuff he talks about, you can do at home. You
Yeah.
don't need to get anything special. You don't have to jump into a hyperbaric chamber. You can just start to learn basic breathing techniques. And it sounds simple, but it's so important. And it's what can really regulate us. Like, if you think about when you're active and doing a lot of cardiovascular work, like if you're going for a run or in a workout class, your breath is what is regulating you and getting you through that. In the same way, you can slow yourself down and get to a calm state, or alpha state. And so that is something that I would really encourage people to dive deeper into, and actually taking deep breaths and staying more conscious and aware of that. So almost, integrating it into a more meditative state of being. That is really, really important. And that's something that is free. We all have the ability to do that, for the most part. I think a second piece of it is the fact that we're all human, right? And we actually do need to connect with other people. I believe the recent statistic was showing something. You might have seen this too recently. It was like that loneliness and social isolation is having a health impact equivalent to smoking, like
I
15
have seen
cigarettes a
that.
day or something. I don't know where that stat comes from exactly, so I don't want to cite it, but even if it's not 15, even if it's not whatever, like, it's still dramatic that loneliness and social isolation, we know, has a negative impact on mental and physical health. And
Mm.
on that note, like, maybe we shouldn't call it mental and physical health, and we should just call it health as a whole. So maybe we'll just do that now moving forward. We'll call it health and say that. So this brings me to this fact of, okay, you can do breathing, which is free, but also trying to create social connection, which is not accessible for everybody, but it is for a lot of us and for a large majority of us. And so, and if it's not accessible for some people, like, reach out to them and try to make it accessible for them. Reach out and just like a micro connection, or a brief conversation can help connect somebody and release those hormones like oxytocin, for example, where it can have a positive benefit on their health. So really think about your community and who your social support is and structure. Does not mean that you have to be with them 24/7. There is
Yeah.
a huge benefit to, like, solitude, but solitude and loneliness are very different. So, embracing solitude, is important too, but community and just breathing, I think, are two big takeaways, I would say.
Yeah, I love both of those, and I've felt them so much in my own life. And, on that community piece, I know Dr. Raghu, you and I have had, like you said, past conversations outside of this, and we were talking about remote work. And I know we have a lot of members of our Apollo community who are working from home, whether it's fully remote, maybe hybrid. Yeah, I mean, it can be really isolating. Like, our Apollo team is scattered all over the country, and, we're mostly connecting virtually. So, like, what is more of the science there on why, I'm so grateful to be speaking with you now, but I'd love to be in person. Like, it's just not the same. So, what is like the science between how that differs? And then also, like, for those of us who are working mostly remote, and this is really our means of a lot of our connection during the day, like, what are some strategies to kind of combat that? Is it just really scheduling time to get out and see people in person, or what else can we do?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have very specific, I have like kind of specific opinions about telework and remote work, that there's like mixed literature on and data on. I think, for example, with like therapy, some people have shown that teletherapy is equivalent to in-person therapy. I don't think that's necessarily true, right?
Mm.
Especially because I do a lot more somatic work with folks. Like, I really don't think that's true. If you look at maybe basic stuff like CBT, that's very algorithmic and also like honestly like reductionist. Um, Maybe it's true in that context, but if you're trying to get deep into the somatics of someone's experience and patterning and attachment, just think about if you're FaceTiming with someone versus if you're in the room with them and how different that experience is for you.
Yeah.
And I don't think this research has been done, but I've always wondered also, what are the differences in hormonal release when you're on a virtual setting versus an in-person setting, right? Like the way that I've been thinking about it recently is that like there's a lot of stuff that science can explain and that we know, but there's a lot more stuff that it can't explain that we don't know. And there's certain experiences that we have when we're in the room with someone else, that you just can't explain with science right now, right? Like we don't have the ability to do that. And there's energy, there's mirror neurons that happen where we feed off of the reaction of somebody else, their body behavior, their facial expressions, their gestures, and we react to that as well. So those are things that are lost, and those are so important for human connection and a feeling of belonging. So when we have remote work, yes, it's convenient in a way. It protects our own time. We can be productive. We can connect with people from all over the place. There's such a beauty to it. Like right now, we have this huge audience that can engage with us. It's awesome. But what I would encourage people is to make sure you don't make that a replacement for actual human connection in real life, and make sure that you continue to value the community that you have that's around you, whether it's your immediate family or your friends, and create that community and make it strong. And even just scheduling, a walk once a week with a friend in real life, is so important. So I would just say, like, take a step back and think about how can I have real connection without a device in front of me? Because your body needs that and your brain needs that. There's just, yeah, there's so much to it. It got me to think of this random fact, by the way, about that I thought was kind of fun was that people who get Botox have actually been shown to not
I
be
just
able
read
to
this.
recognize, emotions as much as other people. Because when we see someone, our facial muscles actually react before our conscious thought happens, and so it's all part of our processing of like emotional attunement, right, with someone in front of you. So anyway, that was kind of interesting, and I feel like Zoom kind of does that with all the filters and stuff like that too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. It's fascinating. Um, Jumping back also to your other point of breath, we do have a question from the audience, if you don't mind. She asked, my young adult daughter with anxiety issues says she thinks she has never taken a deep breath in her life. Can you recommend a good starting place for her to have this experience? Um, yeah, what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
The easiest way to think about it for someone with anxiety and kind of feelings of overwhelm or worry in general is that uh, sort of a box breathing exercise. But what I would say is like, breathing in for 4, holding for 4, and exhaling for 6 to 8. And the longer you can make the exhale, the more impact it will have on actually relaxing the body. Um, so that's what you'd want to do if you're trying to get yourself to calm down and to relax. If you're trying to kind of activate yourself, for example, like if you just woke up in the morning and you want to like get activated and get the day going, you would do the opposite where you do longer inhales and holds, and shorter exhales. But yeah, particularly with anxiety, longer exhale and just getting her to kind of start to do that, will start to get her into a calm state. And then a really cool next step could be to like gift her a journal and just have her just free flow write whatever's coming up for her too, following the breathing exercise.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, jumping back to tools that we can use to improve our mental health, you named some free ones, breath, community. I also kind of wanted to dive into, a lot of us have spent time and effort and money on maybe more intense experiences, such as going to a silent retreat or a yoga retreat, or I know you recently journeyed to Esalen, these really special places. And I think it's becoming more commonplace in our communities and elsewhere. One big question that we had from our community is, when you go to somewhere like this and you hopefully have an incredible experience, how can you really take that with you when you get home instead of just jumping back into your stressors and your old habits? So what are your tips on that when you come back from maybe even just like camping, when you unplug or something that really has benefited your mental health? Unfortunately, we can't be unplugged all the time. How can we integrate that more?
Um, it's
The
hard.
million-dollar question.
It is hard because, yeah, I did journey to Esalen recently. Oh, actually in February. So it's been like almost 2 months.
Okay.
But it doesn't feel like that.
Mm.
And, it was one of the most powerful experiences I've had. It was also the first time I took a break since the summer of 2014. So
Wow.
it was it was a while. And I put my phone on airplane mode and I didn't have it till the last day when I wanted to take some photos. Um, but I came back from that, and I was trying to explain the experience to people, and I couldn't really explain it to them other than being like, I feel like I died and had this rebirth, right? And I didn't do any psychedelics or any substances. I didn't even have a glass of wine or anything, right? And but it was more powerful than any of that. And part of it is allowing yourself to surrender when you're in these experiences, to fully absorb. And I see some people from my Esalen retreat actually in the audience, which is kind of cool.
Amazing.
Um, but there you go. That's the kind of community that was formed.
Yeah.
And I struggled, and I continue to struggle with the integration of it. And like, okay, I went to the silent retreat, I went to this yoga retreat, or I went to Esalen, and now I'm back and I have to go back to work, and like nothing has changed, right? Or so it feels. So
Hmm.
I think allowing yourself to actually making sure you have time to reflect and to integrate, whether that's, hey, I'm going to create a WhatsApp group with a few people from the retreat, and we're going to continue to share and to reflect. That's one way to do it. The retreat I was on, we have that going as well. The second piece of it is, how else can you integrate? So for me, it really reinforced the importance of a meditation practice for me again, right? I've always wanted to be consistent with it, and I've been up and down with it, but it really reinforced it and how beneficial it was. And so fortunately, one of the facilitators runs twice a week meditation community circle in the morning, and I've put it in my calendar and scheduled it. I've missed one or two, but I've generally made it to all of them since then. And I joined that community. So finding ways to still integrate elements of it and understanding like what was so powerful and beneficial about this, and how can I bring this into my everyday life. I met someone recently actually who um, plans to do a once a week Vipassana, right?
Wow.
Which is a silent meditation day, basically. So she gets off devices and basically doesn't speak for the whole day. And I think it's like every Thursday. And if she can't for some reason, she'll try to do a half day, or she'll do it a different day of the week. But it's this commitment to yourself of, what do I need? Because if you don't insure yourself, you're the asset in the whole situation of your world. If you don't insure yourself with what you need, you're not going to be able to be there for anything else that's required of you in your life.
Yeah.
This is just a part of it. Going to a retreat is great, but it's like spending the time reflecting on what you learned and what your body learned from it is what's the most powerful element of it.
Yeah. Without going into too much detail, obviously we don't have a ton of time, but from your experience there at Esalen, when you say you feel like you are reborn, what was the most impactful part for you? Was it the not working? Was it the unplugging? Like what was the most transformative part of that experience for your mental health?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I was on a conference call until I literally lost service driving down there. So I
To
was
the
I was
last
working until I literally got there. It was crazy. Um, Turning that phone off into airplane mode was like wild. I mean, and then I forgot about it 30 hours later. I didn't even know I had one, right?
second.
And I think there's a few things that were really powerful about it that you don't need to go to Esalen for necessarily. You can do this in your local area, hopefully, is right, this idea of like Shinrin Yoku, which is forest bathing, right? Eslen's special in the way that it's on the cliff next to the ocean. It's beautiful, but getting yourself out into nature, that just grounded me so much, and the energy of that grounded me so much. um the element of nutrition was really powerful, right? I think as I brought that up, like the food is all locally grown for the most part. It's just healthy. You're like nourishing your body. And then getting myself to elements of discomfort, also like pushing myself to elements of discomfort, which built confidence and like self-acceptance again. So I think trying to get yourself to do things that you may not do, right? Perhaps like you're not someone who would go to a cooking class or an art class, but you do it, and then you learn and you meet people and you meet community, and you push yourself to a point where you're like, I can do this, and it builds some self-confidence and self-acceptance of who you are. That's really powerful. And obviously the retreat I was on with the things we all know help, right? Meditation and yoga and movement and flow and dance and drama and acting and like all these things of physically moving your body. The last piece of it I'll say is really the human connection, like finding people you feel accept you, or not feel like are accepting you and you can connect with. And yeah, I just remember like every evening I would be on the later side of going to bed, and like I would go into the main dining area to grab some chamomile tea, and like um this guy, my buddy now from the retreat, was like always this there hanging out, reading like something wild on shadow work and Carl Jung. And Zach Smith, you're in the audience. So yeah, shout out to him, because I think those late night conversations, again, offline, right? These human connections that you have in person, they're really what make it. Like that's what you need. We all want to feel a sense of belonging. Um, and nutrition's a part of the sense of belonging. Nature is a part of that as well. And then the human connection, and it all kind of sets you up nicely.
Yeah, sounds amazing. We have another question, Dr. Raghu, that kind of plays into that, talking about connecting with others and community. This person is asking, I'm really curious about developing boundaries between empathizing with people and feeling too much. How do I avoid getting sucked into their strong emotions?
Okay. So it's okay. I'm trying to reframe it a little. So someone who really wants to be present,
Mm-hmm.
right? And how do you prevent yourself from getting sucked in?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this is something that I've been learning, continue to learn over the years, right? Especially as a psychiatrist and like therapist, we are very present for those situations and the deepest emotional states of someone's being and essence. And I think what you have to really set up for yourself as a boundary is what is my capacity and what is my role in this, right? And how much can I handle? And just really being clear about what your intention is and how you want to help and where the boundary is. And so if you start to feel yourself getting sucked in, it's okay for a little bit, right? Like you are essentially putting your ego aside to fully feel what this person is experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's great in some ways, right? It's like it's a form of gratitude for them. It's a form of being really fully present for them. But if you start to feel it to a point where you're no longer providing a service of providing support for this individual, then that's a problem. So what I would say is just if you need to, setting a clear boundary of like, hey, I'm here to help and being present, and also maybe like for yourself, setting a time limit on how you're going to do that,
Mm.
and understanding, really tuning in with yourself and understanding like, when can I not help and when should I escalate this? Right. And something else you can do is also having other people in mind that can also support you along that way with this person. I don't
Yeah.
know if that was the question, but
No, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's another loaded question, it's great to be there for someone in your community, but yeah, we can only all give so much. And fortunately, there are professionals that can take it from there when we're no longer qualified. But yeah, thank you. Um, as we talk, about other tools, maybe some things that have helped you, your patients that, the free things are amazing. Those we can all implement this week. What are some other things that you enjoy or you found that your patients enjoy that, whether it's like actual tools, supplements, stuff like that, that maybe help your sleep or focus? Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. I historically sleep very poorly, so there we go.
need all the help you can
um, yeah, it wasn't the training in the healthcare system that did it. No, it was like
get. Yeah.
I'm always like that. But um, yeah, for me, the first thing is nutrition. You can get everything you need from it. It's just about becoming more educated about what works for you. Like a plant-based diet is not for everybody. A carnivorous diet is not for everybody. So just like becoming in tune with your body of what you really need is really, really important. And that's not free all the time. I do understand that there's, food deserts and scarcity and accessibility issues to that. And so, but I would say that's an area to really invest in yourself of what you're putting into your body. And even small changes like, hey, this week I'm going to try this thing called broccoli like 3 times and just like be mindful of how I feel after I eat it and how it's impacting me. And doing that, one little change at a time is so powerful. And I would recommend, so Dr. Drew Ramsey is a nutritional psychiatrist.
Mm.
He's amazing. And he has a book called Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety, as well as
Yeah,
Eat
we put that
Complete.
one in the chat, right?
Yeah, that's in the
Yeah.
chat. He has another one called Eat Complete, which is a recipe book, super accessible ingredients. I would highly recommend his work. He's really, really incredible. So I think food is the number one thing. Now, sometimes we can't get everything we need because we don't have access to all the food that we need to get the amino acids and the minerals and the vitamins and whatever it is, right? And that's the situation where certain supplements, being very mindful of what you're taking, can be very helpful. And so I also work with another company called PIM, Prepare Your Mind, as their chief medical officer. And with our team there, and advisors like Dr. Nicole Birkins that you all know, uh,
Yeah.
we've been able to formulate some really cool things to help you with your mental hygiene and your overall mood and feelings of overwhelm. And so there's amino acid based products like GABA, but there's also, for me in particular, the methylated B vitamins are really powerful that have helped my mood over as I take them every day. And also the magnesium that I take at nighttime has really, really changed the way that I get to bed and how I stay asleep and feel very well rested and wake up to really combat the day ahead. And so those in particular for me are the ones that I use. We have other products as well. And it's important to really take a look at what you're taking. So I say supplements sparingly because sometimes I see folks who come in, they're on, 15, 20, 30, 40 supplements. And it's like, at
Whoa.
that point, what are you doing besides damaging your liver and your
Yeah.
kidney? You don't need that. Like we can get these things from food supplements should be just a bridge to get there, right? Or
Mhm.
you have some absorption malfunction or whatever it is, right? So that's really the key, is like making the changes with your food and your lifestyle, and then supplements, right? The word supplement is to supplement or to catalyze or to add on in parallel, right? So it's not something you just take continuously necessarily. So
Yeah.
um, I would say that those are really key areas. And I use an Aura ring as well, which has helped me like quite a bit. And just tracking, it's kind of this like type A data driven uh, narcissism in myself, maybe. Uh, yeah. And then, we got the Apollo as
Yeah.
well. But honestly, for devices, that's kind of it. I know people use a lot, they use like continuous glucose monitoring stuff. Just when you're trying to make changes for yourself, just simplify it as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, and can you share, you spoke about some of the supplements from PIM that you're using. Can you share just really quickly kind of the origin story of how PIM came to be? I just think it's really interesting for our community to learn a little bit about that too.
Yeah, sure. So
Zach and everything.
yeah, Prepare Your Mind is a company focused on mental hygiene and mental health advocacy as well. It was started, but I'm telling the story of the founder, so I'll try to
Yeah.
do justice to it. But it was started by Zach Williams, a good friend of mine whose father, unfortunately, the famous and late Robin Williams, passed away by suicide a number of years ago. And Zach went into trauma, had experienced some deep trauma, as you can imagine, and struggled with forms of anxiety and PTSD and addiction. And his wife, Olivia June Williams, now wife, and at the time, she actually got him into amino acid therapy as a treatment. And that helped him quite a bit. In addition to all of the service that he does in his mental health advocacy role as well, and speaking, which really helps as well. So they together co-founded this company, Prepare Your Mind, and I was able to join them early on in that journey and design these formulations. And it's all based on research that's out there showing the benefits of every ingredient. We're very mindful about every single ingredients that is included. There's a lot of supplements out there that have a lot of fillers and just things to kind of beef up the daily value percentages or whatnot. And so we're being very mindful about everything we include, and also running third-party randomized control trials on our specific formulations, not just the individual ingredients. So we're really excited about what we have in store. And the last piece I'll add is that a huge component of it is that we all believe in mental health advocacy. Zach in his role on various nonprofit boards, mine as well, and that, as well as running my own mental health nonprofit in India. So we do give back quite a bit of what we get. And it's really about educating people about mental health and mental hygiene and how to empower nutrition into their lives, and that our products are just a bridge to get there.
Yeah. I don't know how you guys do it all, working tirelessly. So amazing. Yeah, I really appreciate that your supplements are also science backed, just like our research at Apollo. So
And that's why I love Apollo and Dr. Dave.
yeah, yeah, we're sending him good well wishes. Speaking of Dr. Dave, taking a little turn here, Dr. Raghu, as we kind of round out the conversation, um, when I was introducing you and reading off some of your bio, you've been researching psychedelics. Another huge loaded question, but what do you think is their place in this mental health conversation? I know a lot of our community loves Dr. Dave and follows his work in that space. So what kind of stuff are you working on in your roles in this industry?
Yeah, the simple thing is, yeah, I love psychedelics. Here's a little, it says made of magic with a
Oh,
mushroom.
oh,
But
now I can see it. Love it.
there's a lot, and there's tons of mushroom structures around here behind me. So I do love them. I think there's a lot of potential to them if we respect them as well. And one of the things that I guess the pessimistic side of me has been noticing is sort of the over commercialization of a lot of the treatments. Specifically, we're now seeing, with ketamine, meal to home, ketamine. And I'm an addiction psychiatrist. There's addiction potential to ketamine. You can't forget about K-holes and ketamine recreationally being used as a party drug and what that can do to people. And seeing people who have been in recovery for a long time also relapsing because of it. So we have to be really respectful and mindful and ethical about how we are bringing psychedelics into the treatment landscape,
Mhm.
right? Therapy, human connection is the number one key. The psychedelics are a catalyst, which means they're a tool to get there and to aid in that situation. So I do worry a little bit about the commercialization of it coming primarily from people with business backgrounds and not necessarily healthcare backgrounds. However, there's such promise in these tools. We saw that the MDMA trials through MAPS, the
Mhm.
Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Sciences under Rick Doblin's leadership, has shown so many positive results for things like PTSD. We also have shown that ketamine's very, very helpful for treatment-resistant depression, as well as other indications. And psilocybin, I also do believe is very powerful. We've seen it be useful for alcohol use disorder. We've seen it show promise for depression and trauma and eating disorders. And so it's the one that I'm a bit more interested in, although I am looking at other substances and plants, including 5-MeO, DMT, and there's a lot of promise. We just need to do it right, and we really need to be respectful of it. And that's not only being respectful to the actual substance, but being respectful for the traditional practices and the indigenous populations, right, that use these things. The tobacco industry already has shown decades and decades of disrespect for tobacco, right? Tobacco, if you think about it, is actually one of the most widely used psychoactive substances in the world. And traditionally, it's used very ceremonially by indigenous populations. And look what we did to it as a Western
Oh, I
civilization.
haven't really made that connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it's not about, hey, we're going to have like mushrooms selling in every single store like marijuana is. It's about, okay, how do we do this appropriately where the most people can have access to it, but also have access to the therapeutic nature of it. So how do we actually create a healthcare system where people can have access to therapy using psychedelics if warranted and if appropriate for their condition, versus kind of saying, okay, here's a substance, go do it on your own, right? Because the power comes from the combination treatment, not by just the substance alone.
Yeah. So if someone is listening and interested in learning more about psychedelic therapy, where should they start? Like what are their best resources since this is such a wild west world?
Well, you can tune into the Psychedelic Report with Dr. Dave,
Yes, this is true.
obviously. And I say that not to promote Dr. Dave, but honestly, because he's been interviewing some of the most
Hmm.
um, top researchers in the field, thought leaders in the field as well. And so there's a lot to learn by just tuning into his podcast that way. So I would highly recommend that. Check out maps.org as well. They've been really spearheading a lot of the research moving forward in this space. And I would start there.
Yeah.
I can drop a few more resources if we want to do that as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
we can also put more of these links and sites and books and stuff in the recap email as well. Yeah, I saw that Rick Doblin was just on Joe Rogan again. So, it's like the most biggest podcast in the world. And Rick Doblin is the founder of MAPS. So it's really cool to see those things.
Yeah, and also like I wrote down Aldous Huxley's, Doors of Perception. That's definitely a way to get into it as well. So,
Yeah.
and obviously you can read Michael Pollan too, but I'm sure everyone here has already done that.
Yeah. Yeah, really good one. Well, finishing up, just our last few questions here, Dr. Raghu, as we acknowledge the struggles that are going on in health, not just mental health, but health in general, um, how do you think some of these implications of, loneliness and isolation, or, a lot of people not accessing nature, not accessing real food, how do you think that what are the implications, firstly, on maybe business? And then what are the implications as we're trying to forge personal relationships? Like, I even thought when you were talking about, being fully remote, like implications on dating when we're just using our apps and just finding people that we want to spend our life with that way, and, not getting out and having that face to face. Like, what are some of these implications that you're seeing now, like in your patients as a whole?
Well, dating's a whole another podcast. We can
Yeah.
really
We'll need
talk
another 2 hours on that.
yeah, that's a whole problem.
It really is.
But I you're right. The healthcare system as a whole is just honestly like deteriorating. And I think the large scale hospital system is really good at being reactive in situations that we need them, right? Like ICU, critical care, trauma, stuff like that, physical trauma.
Mhm.
Uh, but what are we really doing for the rest of health? And as a society, we're trying to shift it, and we talked a lot about a lot of positive changes that are happening right now, right? And that people are becoming more and more informed through access through podcasts to these thought leaders, and just like learning and really consuming, right? And there's a lot of citizen science and citizen biohacking going on as well.
Mhm.
Mostly generally positive, but some misinformation and things not going in the right direction. However, what we really see with the poor healthcare system is we're seeing rises in things like anxiety, right, which we know, and the stress is being enhanced by higher expectations because you work from home. Depression is happening because of social isolation, like we spoke about, as well as the inaccessibility to healthy foods. And we know there's a direct relationship between what you're consuming in terms of food and how you feel in terms of your mood and your anxiety, as well as your cravings. And we saw as well that during COVID, there was a tremendous rise in substance use, specifically alcohol use. And
Yeah.
and now we're seeing there's this wild just epidemics of overdose deaths. And I see it every day in the clinic as in my addiction work specifically is, it's not just heroin and oxy and fentanyl. Now there's other things like xylazine, which is so powerful. It's a large animal tranquilizer, and Narcan doesn't work against it. And so what do you do? So we have to really stay on top of these things. And a lot of these substances are so powerful, and then they're also fed into the cycle of poverty and houselessness and housing situations and inaccessibility to resources and to things that we should all deserve as human beings. Um, on a lighter note, we see things like sleep disturbances, right, that then feed into anxiety and depression. And so this is like what happens to you on a personal basis and on a community basis. You can easily see how this all translates into work with decreased productivity. And what we're seeing with the social isolation specifically is the lack of appropriate communication amongst colleagues as well, right? So the basic emotional intelligence and interactions that people tend to have when you're in an office setting are much more minimal now when you're just on Zoom and you don't have to interact as much. And so we see a lot of beauty and innovation happen in those office settings, right? Where there's no
Like the water
intention.
cooler
The
talk.
water cooler, right? I love
Yeah,
I just had a water cooler moment today,
I
with
love
one in my clinic. And that's when
yes.
you just like discuss things. You run into someone and you talk about an idea. Like Google, I think was famous for this, right? Where they had like one day of the week where you're not assigned to anything. Like your goal is just to innovate. And so I do think things like that are dying out, unfortunately. And these innovations start to happen more in silos for people who have accessibility to go to things like conferences or events or meetings, and they can actually start to do that, right? Like I ran into Dr. Dave and Catherine last week at a really cool event, but again, it was like a privilege to be able to go to something like that. And I am acknowledging that. So it really does directly impact, business as well as personal relationships. Like you're present at work, but you're not fully engaged, right? And
Mm,
so, and there's also the expectations that like, oh, you're home, so you're saving time on your commute, so you should get more done or whatever,
mm.
right? So there's a lot of mixed signals about it. Um, and then briefly, personally, like I think that, poor mental health, it's a spectrum, right? And if you're on one side of the spectrum, it definitely impacts your relationships. Like depression, anxiety leads to things like irritability. You're not fully present with the person in front of you. Like, what is it that makes a strong relationship? What do you think? If you had to name like 1 to 3 things.
Vulnerability.
Okay.
And I feel like when you're not feeling well, you're guarded and you're not going to open up.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, trust in the person that you're with to open up. Um, and authenticity, like just being able to be yourself.
Yeah. I love those. And I think I always think about it as like, does my body and my being feel safe right now in the presence of this person? Uh, and if the other person is dealing with something like anxiety or poor sleep or depression, if they're not fully present with you, then you're not going to feel safe there anymore. And then, the whole mantle of the relationship starts to break apart, and then the communication just breaks apart. And so it's really like it's all tied together is the whole point, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
And we talk about safety here at Apollo a lot, like using these devices that allow us to kind of shift from that fight or flight to more of a rest or digest. But yeah, I think a lot of us, including myself, have thought of safety for a long time as okay, I'm safe in my home, I'm not in immediate danger, but it's deeper than that. Like, do I feel at ease? Do I feel, able to open up like we're saying? Um, and it's like, yeah, when you're on constantly agitated or, you can't get into that state.
yeah. And if you don't have an Apollo, you sit down with your partner or with your work colleague when you feel that you're both disconnecting from each other, and you activate your vagus nerve by doing a breath work exercise like we spoke about earlier to calm yourself and to ground yourself. And then you open your eyes and you have the conversation, right?
Mhm.
Being fully present and taking away other distractions and other obstacles, because that also activates that parasympathetic system like you spoke about.
Yeah. And if you don't have an Apollo, speaking of which, we are running a promo through April 16th. So it's $50 off certain SKUs, certain colorways. So head on over, now's the time. But yeah, well, thank you so much, Dr. Raghu, for taking this time out. I know your schedule is crazy. And if there is anyone in the audience that, wants to follow your work, we have your website here, we have your Instagram. But could you share just, as a closing note, what a couple of things that you're working on? Like you said, there's so much that you do, but a couple of things that you're working on and like where else they can connect with you, maybe your foundation and stuff like
Yeah, definitely shoot me a message through the website or on Instagram. Probably website is more reliable.
that.
And I'm happy to communicate, like talk to you guys, answer any questions you might have, send you more resources. Um, I try to put like the books I'm currently reading on my website as well, and just like
Yeah.
thoughts that I have come up. So feel free to tag along with me on there as well. And yeah, in terms of what I'm working on right now, I am thinking a lot about quality of life. The conversation of longevity is really blowing up
Mm,
with Peter Attia's new
yeah.
book that came out, and Mark Hyman's book and so forth. And so it's interesting to talk about longevity, but I am getting really deep into it, mixing longevity with performance as well as day-to-day quality of life. And how can we, the theme that has driven me up to this point and continues to drive me is how do we enhance the human experience for the time that we have? And we can think about longevity, but how do we enhance the experience today as well as tomorrow, as well as 15 or 20 years from now? And so I'm thinking a lot about that. So reach out to me if you want to just jam out on that topic, because
Yeah,
it's something I'm excited about.
really interesting. And oh yeah, can you share just a little bit about the foundation?
Oh yeah, and then Minds Foundation
Yeah.
is basically my baby. I started it 2010 during undergrad at Wesleyan in Connecticut, and it started in 30 small villages in Western India and Gujarat, providing mental health education and access to care. And now we've serviced over 6.5 million people. We launched the first and now only 24-hour mental health 1-800 mental health helpline in India that's managed by clinical psychologists. We have a subsidized therapy center that's about $4 or $5 per session that's run by clinical psychologists. And we do a lot of work just literally door to door in schools, training teachers and kids in small communities that are quite rural as well as urban. And we're the first to really work with the LGBTQA community, as well as do a lot of research in addition to that and work with corporate partners for larger scale campaigns as well. And so, yeah, it's been running for quite a while now, and you can check it out at mindsfoundation.org, MINDS, or on Instagram at Minds Foundation. And there's tons of mental health resources that are available for free through there as well.
So amazing. I don't know when you sleep. Just with
Yeah,
everything
well,
you do.
that's why I got the Aura ring to tell me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here. And anyone else who still has questions for Dr. Raghu, you can contact him. Make sure to check out the sale. And yeah, we'll be sending out a recap email with a lot of these links. If you know someone that registered and can watch it live, they'll still get the recording. So the recording will be out in a couple of days.
Yeah, and I'm speaking, well, it's pre-recorded, but I'm speaking at the mental health summit in mental
Oh
health and
yeah.
wellbeing summit as well through the John W. Brick Foundation. So that launched today. There's some incredible speakers. Gabor Mate just spoke today. So yeah, people can sign up for that. Just check me out on Instagram and I have it posted on there. It's completely free to join in.
Cool. Well, that'll, yeah, keep these conversations going. They're important.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing for everyone who joined today. Just go and talk to someone now about maybe something you learned. Hopefully you learned something and just spread the word.
Yeah. Get outside if you're on the West Coast and it's
Get
not
outside.
late. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Raghu.
Thanks for having me. It was really great to catch up, Blair, and chat about this.
Yeah. Bye, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.